I think we're here to launch the Wasafiri special issue focusing on Bangladeshi literature in translation. Yes, I believe the issue has been already launched, or it's already been published in London, so it's available in the shops there. And this is the official launch here in Bangladesh, and I'm really proud to. Do we have a copy of it? Yeah. So it's a great, occasion to be here because, I mean, it's very important for people who are living in country to promote the literature that they've grown up with and to show it and showcase it to the rest of the world who, have a tendency to focus on their own literatures and their own, things, their own literature that they're familiar with. So by slowly and knocking on their door, or by repeatedly knocking on their door and showing them the literature that's coming out of a certain country and reminding them that there's more, beyond their domestic doorsteps, we, I think, begin to open the door to the culture in general, the political situation, the economic situation. So, this is a great endeavor that you two have undertaken. And I think we're here to talk about Wasafiri and the special issue, but also about how you can get published and how you can, help promote yourself and how to promote Bangladeshi literature in the wider world. Correct? Okay. So we'll start by asking you two, Asan and Anis, what prompted you to approach Wasafiri, and did you approach anybody else? And what was it, the Dhaka Lit Fest, the inaugural Dhaka Lit Fest, that inspired you to create this special issue? How did it begin?
Hi, can you hear me? Is this working? No. How do you make it work? Hi, good morning. I just want to introduce the magazine first before we speak why we approached them. There should be a slideshow there, just a few covers from their past issues, just to give you a sort of very basic idea if you're not familiar with the magazine. Wasafiri has been around for a long time. They've published some big names, including Derek Walcott, V.S. Naipaul, Vikram Seth. So we thought, Anis Bhai and I, we were always trying to get Bangladeshi literature, Bangladeshi writing to the wider world. And this is work of a lot of labor, not just labor of love, a lot of hatred too, because I was getting annoyed doing this. So it's a pretty thankless task, I must say, editing anything, because you can't put your own work in, you're doing a service for others and not getting paid very much, or not at all. So Wasafiri we approached back in May 2013. I remember the date, it was May 30th. Anis Bhai happened to be in London because he was attending the Hay Festival in Wales. So we set up a few meetings with a few other journals as well, including Granta and White Review. Wasafiri were forthcoming. Granta was too. We actually did an online edition back in December 2013. And Wasafiri, the pitch went out back in July 2013. By the time it came across to their board and it was commissioned, it was sort of early 2014. And then we advertised this. We were accepting submissions from all over. And then the editing started, the selection and the editing started. And here we have the final copy. Should be with us very soon on stage. I will be able to show you. Why we did this? It's really a simple answer. I mean, to get Bangladeshi writing to the wider world. And Wasafiri is a great platform to start with. And there'll be more endeavors this way. But I think today's panel is about how you can also get involved. I mean, you can't rely on me and Anis Bhai to do all the work. So, so that's the essence of it. I'll pass on to Anis Bhai now to carry on.
I myself, studied in America, and I came across Wasafiri when I was a student. It would always be among the journals in the library. So it has always been among the top journals, literary journals of the world. And I went to several universities. And no matter which university I was in the library, you would always see Wasafiri alongside other top English literature and international journals. And Wasafiri was very striking to me when I was a young man in my 20s in university, and I would read Wasafiri, because it was the one place where I would see a lot more writing, or writing almost mainly from, quote, other places. A lot of journals that I came across in America, very famous ones, they were very exciting, very interesting to read just out of my literary curiosity, like the Paris Review or Plowshares or Kenyan Review or Gettysburg Review. They're all called Review. Lately, they've started getting more hipster names like whatever, the White Review. but some of them have now stopped N+1. They've dropped the review from the title. So, but there were mostly stories by Americans about American life or experience, sometimes translated works from European writers. And if they had work from what we call the third world, often it was the really established names, something from somebody like that. Wasafiri, by comparison, would be presenting newer and fresher voices, so it was very exciting to me. Years later, now I was living in Dhaka, I went back to London, we were getting involved in a number of literary enterprises of, bringing what was then Hay Festival to Dhaka, thinking and talking about starting our own journals here, like Bengal Lights. And we felt that it was time to start taking Bangladeshi writing abroad. And the two places that came to my mind immediately as the places to go to, one was Wasafiri, both because honestly I think in terms of what we would call, quote, world literature, the two most, not only prestigious, but the two most committed and dedicated publications for a long time have been World Literature Today and Wasafiri. There's also, what's it called, Words Without Borders. But they are, I think, focused almost entirely on translations, which is great.
Yeah.
But in terms of a combination of both original English writing and translated work, the one from America is World Literature Today. They've, famously sponsored the New Start Prize, and I think famously also have a record having more people among their winners and juries who've gone on to win the Nobel Prize than any other prize or publication in the world. So they really know their stuff. They're a kind of publication that would put someone like Mo Yan on the cover in the early 90s, who 20 years later goes on to win the Nobel Prize. So they're people who really have their ear to the ground. Another publication like that is Wasafiri, which is out of UK. So given that these are publications which really know what we call world literature is about, who really care about it, who go out there to search out new voices, both individual voices and also listening to places that are at some point reaching a certain kind of maturation or some kind of iteration that becomes vital, that's who they are. So from that point of view, it made sense to go to Wasafiri. It would not only be a prestigious platform, but it was a very natural fit. The other one to go to was Granta, certainly based out of England. Granta, I think, needs much less explanation of who they are and why they're exciting and why you would want to go and be recognized there. One thing I'll point out here, if I may, I say this in all humility, and yet I say this. Asan and I were either foolish enough and also ambitious enough, we didn't think of, quote, small places who would take us because somehow the competitive barrier is low or something. I don't know what's a nice way to say this, but...
well, if you think small, you'll never get big. That's what my dad used to say.
We just walked into Wasafiri and said, we think there's important things happening in Bangladesh. You need to give us a special issue. We walked into Granta and said, there's interesting things happening in Bangladesh. No one's probably come to tell you. We've come, we're telling you, and you have to do it. Then they said, so tell us what. And we made formal pitches, we gave them samples, we made a good argument. It's nice to walk in with your jacket and your pocket square, but eventually you have to follow up with a lot of writing and make a convincing case. And luckily, our writers supported us. They had already been doing work that we could present to them. And we did. Asan and I managed to curate the first ever online feature on Bangladeshi writing in Granta. And then we have the special issue of Wasafiri, which took over a year's worth of work to get all these pieces and edit them and curate them.
Can I actually ask a question? Is that on? Yeah? So how many writers are featured in this edition?
Actually, can I make a request to my friend Inam there? Can we get, because we've been requesting a copy of Wasafiri, can you get someone to give us one? So,
I've been frantically texting.
so I think you'll be the man who can save us.
And actually, since we're requesting, can we also just turn the lights a bit down on us and turn it up on the audience? Because we like to have audience participation.
Oh, I think it's here. So
How many writers are?
I can't give you a count without counting, but it's a combination of fiction, non-fiction, poetry, translation, book reviews. So it's really and an interview and a photo feature of an art essay.
So I'm just going to add here. I mean, these.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So here's the copy. Finally, yay! So this is the copy, and we're launching this. Very happy launch. I should hold it with you because it's joint effort.
We will stand up with this issue, which marks the official launch of Wasafiri in Bangladesh. Thank you. This is the first ever of any international journal doing a issue entirely dedicated to Bangladeshi writing.
Yeah, these. You were talking about how long it took you to, curate this article, this magazine and this journal, and I mean, this is the thing with these labors of love. It is incredibly laborious, and it is often done on a shoestring. Even Granta and Asia Literary Review, they don't pay their writers a lot. The merit or the payment comes in the reward of seeing your name in print, the fact that your name will be seen by thousands of other people who never heard of it before. So in itself, that is often payment. I sometimes say to my writers, one of my writers got into Granta, and I was doing cartwheels, and he, it was like, we don't care if we get paid or not. The fact is you're in Granta, and that has led to so many other opportunities for him to get published. So I would say to any young writer to just continue to submit to these journals, your poetry, your photography, your short stories. And this is a fantastic way. This is a very a well-trodden path in order to find your way into traditional book publishing, is to show that you're trying and being published.
I want to pick up on that comment and say a couple of quick things. Asan and I have helped curate Bangladeshi writing for Granta Online and now for Wasafiri. Because we were the editors, our own writing didn't go into Granta or Wasafiri. If and when my own writing goes into Granta and Wasafiri, I will be so delighted. And as Kelly rightly said, that if you're in Granta, even if you don't get paid, that eventually leads to other opportunities. But for me personally, even if it didn't lead to any obvious direct further opportunities, for me as a writer, simply being in Granta, which I've read since 1988, where I've read so many of my most, writers I've most admired, the fact that I'm in the pages of something where my most, cherished and admired writers have been, that is the reward. That recognition, that's the reward. That's what you write for, And one thing is with Wasafiri, if I can say, Asan and I, we put out, this was, public notices were given, and we put it out in local papers, in Dhaka Tribune, in Daily Star, in Bengal Lights Journal, in their online portfolios. We made public calls. Wasafiri made public calls. And one thing I'll confess, we were a bit disappointed by not just by the volume of submissions. We were hoping for many more submissions than we did. Once it comes out, sometimes people will say, oh, I didn't get published, or so-and-so should have been published. There was a public call. It had to come in. We can't just solicit from who others might have thought of, because if they really cared, then they should go curate one too. But
they should have suggested them to you, or
Yeah. So when you in future going forward, when you see public calls, you should really respond to them and not think that, oh, I wonder if it will work. Don't select yourself out. Send it in. We would love to get, because there are writers here published who've not been published before. We went not just for the famous names or big names. It was meant to be whatever was the best of the submissions that came in for this issue.
Is there an overarching, so I talk as a publisher. I run a publishing house based in the UK, which is specialized in translated fiction. So I bring foreign writers into the English-speaking world and into the UK and the US in particular. Is there an overarching theme? Yes, you have found the way you present, because one thing when you submit, for example, when I receive submissions, it's not enough, for example, to write me an email saying, "Dear Madam stroke Sir," or Sir stroke Madam, and then I get about, I don't know, 3 pages of synopsis or a story or a life story. What really needs to almost be done is within the first sentence, you have to tell me, why should I, so me as a European, be interested in your story? So there has to be an overarching theme, something you have to catch my attention with. And I guess you had to do the same when you were pitching to Wasafiri. So what was your pitch? What is the overarching theme? How did you present?
Because, Michael, when you publish each year, you said to me you have an overarching theme each year that helps you with the direction of your publishing strategy. And does this issue have an overarching theme apart from, Bangladesh, which is enough, to be frank? But I mean, sometimes like at the review, each issue had a particular, and as with Granta, each issue has a particular theme. What is the...
I'll come to the theme in a minute. It's a very good question. I'm just going to touch back on the previous question or the previous conversation we were having. Getting published in a magazine like this is also the first stepping stone to getting noticed by agents, because you need an agent to be published anywhere, to get your fiction right, or to get your novel published, or to get publishers notice. I mean, Wasafiri, as far as I know, is picked up by agents and publishers. So this is a great first step. And you don't always need me and Anis Bhai to do this. I mean, you can send this directly, your piece directly to them. Unsolicited pieces are considered to any reviews, actually, not just Wasafiri, Granta. There's so many. And proactivity is very important today. You have to basically be able to reach out to different magazines, publications, small and big. And the more you have, the better as an aspiring writer. And I think the issue was really aimed at people who are trying to get it published abroad. So this would be a nice link. And I must say, the Dhaka Lit Fest, we've got writers published in foreign publications, publishing houses, because we brought agents and publishers to Bangladesh. We connected them. So that was the other end of it that never gets mentioned, I must say.
Yeah, I must say, as a young writer, you should, try your best to attend these festivals, to meet agents, to meet publishers, to show them who you are, and get their business card. And you're probably always approached by people, wanting to submit their work to you, as am I. And I think great, and we love to see new young writers. And another thing about Wasafiri or other reviews is when I was at the Asia Literary Review, we published some very new writers, a very raw talent, and so it was their first time ever. Even a translator, Deborah Smith, who now runs a publishing house of her own and translated Wan Gong's The Vegetarian for Granta books, actually. And I remember when she sent me in one of her first translations ever, when she was at SOAS doing a Korean translation. It was very kind of earnest, and it was too heavy, and it just needed her to kind of relax and enjoy it. And so she and I worked together on an online-only version. So we helped her, with her career as a translator, and this is what will happen when you submit to a journal. It doesn't your piece doesn't have to be it has to be as super polished as you can get it, but then you have to understand that you will be edited, and that will help you as well as a writer to learn how to write better.
I'll just add for the theme, and I'll pass it to you. With the theme, we were very open about the theme, as long as it's coming from a Bangladeshi. That was the only criteria. But we've had submissions, and they're published. A story based in Nigerian classroom to a travel story in Afghanistan. So those were quite refreshing. But the only thing, I think I was in charge of the cover, so I was very focused on having a very Bangladeshi cover. If you see, it's a rickshaw art. It's very unique to Bangladesh. So that was one of my sort of concerns, that I wanted to be very inherently Bangladeshi and very original that way. And people loved it. Everyone loved it. And our pitch was really about just contemporary Bangladeshi writing. Pass it to you for more.
You know, I no longer remember what our one-line elevator pitch was, but some of the things we highlighted to Granta, to Wasafiri, and to anyone we still engage, and we could say it with more confidence in May 2013 than we can now, but we would say to them, look, Bangladesh is the great unheard story. Bangladesh is a Muslim-majority country that's basically secular, that has a flawed democracy, but a democracy built by itself, not through a war and $1 trillion invested by others. It is the most densely populated country in the world. Dhaka, with 130,000 people per square mile, is the most densely populated city in the world. Most Dhakaites don't know that. For comparison, Calcutta, Bombay, Karachi all have an average of 30 to 40,000 people per square mile, which sounds like a lot. Dhaka has 130,000. Except for a few tax havens and gambling destinations, no one else has this kind of density. So that's who we are. We live against all odds, with our land being engulfed by rivers and seas, with a kind of congestion, so many people with so little land on which to rest, and yet we are one of the great success stories. A country that was born with least promise or expectation from many in the world who had even opposed our creation. And we have gone on to become a real development story, to the extent that we outpaced not only Pakistan, but even India in most social indicators. So it sounds like very dry things, but we would go and tell them, when you look at these facts of how Bangladesh has succeeded against such enormous odds, there is something there in the vitality of the people there and in their stories there, and you just need to hear what those stories are. That would be our pitch when we went in.
And all I want to add to that, actually, you were saying that's very dry things, but it isn't. That's what catches my attention, and that's clearly what caught Wasafiri's attention. That they, suddenly, I think, yes, so in some ways, you could say everything you described is a universal human experience. Living in London, we also know what it feels like living in a big city. However, what you have, what we don't have, is that added, the intensity, the density here. And even though you might not, and this is, of course, where art comes in, so it's, even if your story is not saying, and I tried to drive from the airport to the hotel, and it took me 3 hours. In fact, it shouldn't really say that. But subconsciously, that will have fed, that experience of living, for example, in this city, will have fed into your story. And that's because you always have to just think, it's the marketing. Because so the writing is one thing. You sit in your own head, basically. You write your story. But once that is done, you need to look at it from the outside and approach it from the outside and think, how can I sell? And you need to think about selling. So anyone you approach, an agent, a publisher, a magazine, you need to sell. You need to make a connection with that person.
Yeah, no dead grandmother stories. You have to show a maturity and a practice in your writing. And as I said to Anis, a writer from Bangladesh has to be the best writer ever, not just the best writer in Bangladesh. You have to transcend your border. The best writers always transcend their borders, they transcend their time. The stories are timeless and have a universal appeal. So you have to, remember that. Maybe initially you will write a more domestic story, which is, great and it's good practice, and it's good for your confidence, and it's good for, building up a domestic audience and getting your name out there initially. But then to go into the world stage, you have to, go to that extra level.
No.
Oh, you don't think so?
I totally disagree. You here have now a publisher and agent dispute going on. Sorry, gentlemen.
Please, let's have it.
No, I would not publish a story. You tell me it's universal. It has to be rooted in your local, in your own indigenous experience. I don't, and that's, again, which actually, so many stories I reject because they could have been written anywhere. I don't want that. I as a reader, and I take myself, as a publisher, when I look at a story, I take myself as a reader. What stories do I want? I really want to know what it feels like, as if I'm in Bangladesh living and Bengali life. That's what I want to feel. And so you have to stay local in order to become universal.
But
do never just for no, I think this is really, especially I think for so you write. I mean, I write in English. I'm German. I write in English, and I'm very aware that whatever I write, I have to stay true to myself. I can't suddenly think, oh, the English, somebody English-born would think that or this, or I have to pretend that I was educated in Oxford or whatever. No, that's not of interest. What is of interest is your own unique personal experience, and if you can translate that into character, plot line, then you've got a masterpiece.
well, this is what I mean. The story has to be universally, it has to be a story that we can all understand. Man against man versus himself, man versus the universe. Of course, yes, it must be have a location, absolutely. But and that's what I mean by universal appeal, and I totally agree with you. I, as an agent, want to read these stories that are very, that let me know. And that's why I'm with that's why I founded the Asia Literary Agency, because I want to know what it's like to be in these countries, what it's like to come from, what's going on now, how does it feel. But from my experience over the last 3 years, and as an editor who was commissioning, fiction and nonfiction, and working with editors who were commissioning fiction and nonfiction and translation, you are, that's why you're one of the most influential women in publishing, because you are looking for something that most other editors are not. Okay, so I think, of course, if I found more editors like you, I'd be, falling on my knees, crawling on my knees to you. But you're the exception. You're the exception to the rule. I have found that from my own experience. I would rather most people be like you. I would beg them to be, but it's very difficult to persuade them.
But then the question is, can I just answer, and then
Yeah.
I'll hand over to you. The question then I'd say is, do you want to be a good writer? And I'm also a writer, and I personally want to be a good writer. And the stories I publish, I only publish stories I think are good, great literature. I don't ever publish stories I think, okay, it's because it's the next Harry Potter. I'm not interested in that. Harry Potter, that's done and dusted. So I'm looking for something which feels alive, because that's the same demand I make on myself as a writer. So that's, if you want to write for the market, then yes, then I advise you to read the Harry Potters and try to think of what might be the next thing and try to hit that target. But if you actually want to produce literature which expresses something from within your own unique identity as a nation, as people, as an individual, then sorry, I've lost.
I think the Glass Palace, that doesn't have any. That's a universal story set in a very particular place, set in a very particular, a swathe of time. So yes, but that's a very, as I said, it's a universal story. It's a man against himself, man against the universe, man against the forces of oppression, against history, time, and so that's what I mean by a universal story that will have appeal outside. That's centered in a very particular place. But he's a fine writer who started writing long time ago. But also I think a lot of us sit here and talk about literature and what it's right. So what about Kevin Kwan? Writing about Crazy Rich Asians. I mean that's a fab fun book that's done really well. It's not literature, but it's still talking about Asia in a particular way. And then I think we have to it's a story. It's a great story. And it's fun and it doesn't take itself too seriously. And so he's. I think we've got to look at those kind of stories as well. We don't also all have to write, the Glass Palace. So, there are those kind of stories that we could and should be writing. Have fun with it. It's hard work, as it is. So have fun with what you're, creating.
I always, a friend of mine, when I was a very young writer, when I was 25 and hadn't even written my first book yet, a friend of mine once, we were browsing through a bookstore and we were looking at writers we liked, and he picked up a Kobo Abe novel, this Japanese writer, and he looked at me and said, Anis, I could die happy if I could write a second-rate Kobo Abe novel. So writing is hard. Writing something even that we think is not that great, you'd be amazed how much effort and work it takes to do even that. But what I want to talk about is yesterday in the keynote speech, Nayantara Sehgal said writing is political. And she's right. And she is right in the sense that she meant it and the way it's become visible with the kind of activism she's doing with the return of her award and other people who are joining in that. But writing is actually political in much more intimate ways as well. And it is political at two levels. One is a very personal one of what you think your, quote, licenses are, of what you can say, and how you find the strength and avenues to break out of it. And I personally think I can always sense what is, quote, genuine writing. To me, genuine writing is not that someone is located in a place and somehow has some authentic purchase on the reality or information of that place that no one else has. To me, that kind of writing is very dull. Really genuine writing is about a writer trying to break free from their perception of prescription of what's prescribed. And by that, I don't mean what is prescribed in general in the public domain or what we think is not okay to talk about. So it's not about a Saudi woman writing a novel about adultery. In her mind, if she doesn't feel that that's a real taboo to cross, that writing won't have energy. But someone in America can take that, what in America would be a very trite theme, and turn it into something riveting if it was something that she, in her deepest self, felt was important to talk about, vital, and that there was some personal risk. Not risk in terms of some family social consequence, but risk in her own psychology of where I'm going, what I'm talking about. In the process of that traversal, what will I discover about myself? That's what real writing is about. So in that sense, writing is political. Then there is the externality of it, which is when we go to places. So what we do in our privacy, in the, this is wonderful. This festival, we're here, we're mixing, we're mingling. And the reality of writing, of being a writer, is the complete opposite of it. It's you're alone in a room, inside your head. It's the most antisocial thing. It's like the opposite of a festival. But then, getting the writing out to the world is everything else we've said so far. It's about marketing, it's about being politically savvy, culturally savvy, and it's about getting cultural politics. And I want to say a few things about that, which I think would respond to the things you have been both pointing out. For me personally, from where I am, and from the time I was 19, I've had an instinct about it. Maybe the intellectual corollary of it has come to me more recently. The way I see how world literature is defined and how I want myself to have a place in that is this. For the most part, what has now come to be defined as world literature over the last 4 decades is really literature about other places and other people from the vantage of white American, white European perspective. And the other that they're interested in is usually people who have somehow already washed up on their shores. So they're kind of like, who the hell are these people? What's going on in that neighborhood? And sometimes, where do they come from and what's happening there? Which is why someone like Jhumpa Lahiri will write a novel, and even if she talks about Brooklyn, she has to bring in a bit of Naxalism, or she talks about, what the hell has Brooklyn got to do with Naxalism? You want to write about Naxalism in West Bengal? Write about Naxalism. What is this New England, West Bengal Naxalism connection? It's really, so there's a lot of writing like that, which I think of as, let's say, call it quota writing. We have people, and if in America, let's say new Syrians, until 2 years ago, until the Syrian war broke out, 5 or 10 years ago, you had a Syrian novel come to anybody in England or New York, they would have said, we're not interested. It's only 4 million people, and we don't have many Syrians here. We're not interested. Give us Indians, give us, whoever else is a, big non-white section of people. Give us Mexicans, give us whoever else. If you're in France, give us Algerians. No one was interested in Syrian. Believe me, they would love a Syrian novel now. I've actually thought about writing a Syrian novel myself. I think it would get published. And actually, you know what? There's 2 ways to do it. One is you talk about the trouble and trauma that's in the headlines. So you can write quota novels by the headline. And if you want to be really clever and to be really loved by the cool people in publishing and in culture, then what you do is you completely counter that expectation. So if I wanted that kind of success. Right now, I would write a novel about punk lesbian DJ in Damascus who's still running this little thing in Damascus. I think that would be a super hit. So that is sort of how Western publishing works. So the really big publishing houses who make these corporate quota decisions, the problem with them is once you've got your Jhumpa Lahiri, you don't want another Indian. Once you've got your whoever else, you've got your, who's the Mersalt guy, Kamal Daoud. Good luck to the next Algerian. So for me, writing is a guerrilla operation. I am going to play that game. I'm going to give them the impression that I'm going to give you this thing that you want, but I'm going to end up hopefully smuggling what I want to talk about and then get it still out there.
Yeah.
I'm just going to quickly add one more thing. It's beautiful, actually. I think any young writers in the audience should just take this advice and just steal it. And the other thing I just want to quickly add is when a movie is made from a book, that's the end of it. Basically, so Harry Potter made into a movie. Dan Brown's, what is that crap book called? Da Vinci Code has been made into a film. It's done. So if you follow that, it's over. Publishers are not interested. You need to find a niche. I'm talking about commercial writing that's not been made into a movie yet.
And also, I mean, in London, I've found that, that there is, because the UK has this colonial history in Southeast Asia, and they have had a lot of Indian and Southeast Asian writers, published. So that's kind of I've had one publisher say, "Oh, I'm sort of sick of the South Asian novel. Can't you bring me something else?" And it's like, really. I mean, this is the kind of responses I get, and you just have to water off a duck's back. Next, try the next person. But could I just move on to here towards Wasafiri? And when we published the Korean issue, I have a very particular interest in Korean literature because of a background in it. But when we were publishing the special Korea edition of the Asia Literary Review, it was very interesting to me to see how Korean literature had evolved and where it was now. The younger writers coming through and how they reacted against the older writers and the older tradition of writing. And we're just trying something sort of very experimental, and well, kind of experimental and sort of leaning on the kind of French traditions of the Oulipo and things like that, and trying new forms of writing. What did you discover when you were editing this collection, and what are young writers writing about in Bangladesh today?
So I'll go first, and then you can also add some stuff. Asan and I had divided up the duties, and I often abused my privilege as Boro Bhai and left him with a lot of the grunt work, which is why he said, "I'll never do this again. Don't do this. This is so hard." I had great fun doing this because he was doing so much of the heavy lifting. But what we did, we were on the one hand, because we also have our specialties. So poetry was almost entirely in his hands. Fiction was mine. Non-fiction we both did, that sort of thing. What we were looking for, I would say, this is meant for, let's say, a global audience or an international audience. For me, and I do hope that most of you will get a copy and check it out. I hope when you read it, you will feel that you are reading something new and fresh. It's not that, oh, I know this. No, because these are real stories. That's what real stories do. They should be striking enough for you as well. We have stories that were a story that was written in Bangla by Afsan Chaudhary, translated by Mahmoud Rahman, about a guy in the early 70s or late 70s who's an ex-communist and is trying to find a foothold in a neo-capitalist transition. It's Zia's time, he's trying to find his time. It's a fascinating story. So, we've got stories like that. We've got stories by totally young writers, somebody who is an expatriate, I think lives in America, but he wrote about street kids, pickpockets, and that type in Gulshan Avenue, how they operate. And it's funny, it's fresh, and then there's stories that are much more sensitive and to a different kind of sensibility, much more interior stories. There's a great story of that kind. That one's Nupu? Yeah, Nupu's story is, I think, very sensitive story. Shorbari, who is the first Bangladeshi to be writing for an American TV series, Quantico, has a story here, which is actually about a black man and an Indian woman having an encounter in an American parking lot. Abir Haq has written a story, memoir, of being a kid in a Bangladeshi kid in a Nigerian classroom. Zishan Khan has written a story about traveling through Pashto land as a Bengali. And
The second marriage.
yeah. And then this second marriage by Khadimul Islam.
I mean, not his second marriage.
No. Go ahead. Tell us.
Khadimul Islam's piece was about I think his maternal grandfather's second marriage in Chittagong. So he called it second marriage Chittagong style. So that gives a very unique perspective of how older men sometimes get married in this country. While I was sort of doing a lot of the work, I felt, and I didn't bring this issue to Ani's Bhai because he was also busy with other things, is people didn't follow the house rule. I mean, I kept saying there's a way to submit. You have a font, you have a style, and no one followed that. So I had to do all the sort of the admin work as well, changing the fonts, changing the style. But that wasn't too annoying because I got my intern to do it. What was really annoying was people just didn't know. I mean, not everyone. A few of them submitted to this edition, but also started submitting the same piece to other magazines. You don't do that. That's just not on. Because I soon found out that someone got actually published, one of the pieces that was submitted, in somewhere else, in an Indian publication. So obviously I was very annoyed, and there was commission to him. So I had to withdraw him from this issue and find somebody else. And so these are very amateurish things one shouldn't do, and that just increases our work.
Can I just quickly pull out a couple of highlights to give you a sense of the kind of range of writing we have here? We have also a terrific story by Iqtisad Ahmed, which is about sort of the kind of terror we're dealing with now and from a kind of security point of view. So, set in London. We have a story by Shagufta Sharmin Ahmed, which is also a first-time publication. She's never been published in English. This is in translation by one of our best translators, Nadia Ahmed. We have an interview with Tahmima Anam, who is very well known, a good friend of ours. We had asked her to do the one main interview in this story. And the lead essay itself is hilarious. Yeah. It is, if you're ever going to read a single essay on Bangladeshi writing, especially in English, this is it. And it's been written by our own Kaiser Haq, and it's called The Hijra Comes In from the Heat and Dust. So, there's a terrific range, as all of you readers, you have your sense of what Bangladeshi writing is about, both in Bangla and in English. But you can sense what kind of range and diversity we were able to get from the submissions we had, and we picked it and curated it to show us that range. Bangladeshis who may be in a Nigerian classroom, traveling through Pashto land, in America, in Bangladesh, in the streets of Dhaka, coming out of 70s Marxism, the entire range of it, because to me, that is world literature. Bangladesh is the world. It's not just fitting into somebody else's quota.
I'm just going to add just one more thing. While we're highlighting pieces, I must highlight Safia Azim's learning to read the signs. This was such a difficult task to do, or to get someone to do it, because we needed someone who can do the art pieces or the photography pieces as well as the essay. So two skills coming into one, and Safia Azim did an amazingly good job. This is about the the artwork you see behind trucks and rickshaws in Dhaka or in Bangladesh, things like Mayer Doa or Elahi Bharosha, the significance of that, and a very literary take on that, as well as the history behind it. So thank you, Safia, for doing this. And she did the art, sort of the photography for the cover as well.
Okay, since, one of the main features of the Dhaka Lit Fest is, Women of the World Festival from London. How many submissions did you have from women and how many from men? Was there was it balanced?
I think in our writing, and certainly writing in English, there is much more balance than there is in many other spheres of work. So we had a fair representation, but we also, we actually solicited writing from more women than from men, because,
in order to address
because just in terms of general submissions, there wasn't as many from women. So we did reach out to more women to have what we felt was a fairer representation of all the kinds of stories we'd want to have.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Except poetry. Poetry in Bangladesh is generally, in English, is generally written by more women than men, which is why I'm trying as well. So.
And did you pay the contributors?
Yes, everyone's
Oh,
paid. Everyone's
really?
getting a fair
In
amount.
fact, by Bangladeshi standards, the contributors are getting paid very well. Just for the record, Asan and I chose to do this for free. We were supposed to be paid as well, but for a variety of reasons, we said no. All we want is to be able to do this. So we did not get paid. We even asked Wasafiri that you can even give away our portion of the payment to the contributors, and they've been paid on average between $250 and $400 pounds for
Oh
each
my
piece.
God.
So
That is
in
That's
Bangladeshi taka, that's
incredible.
about 50 to 60,000 taka up to
For
That-
each story,
that is
each
more
poem,
than-
people have been paid quite a bit.
That's more than Granta will pay, you know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I know.
Like substantially more
Yeah,
than...
we were very grateful. And actually, this is something I really must say before we run out of time. We are so grateful to Wasafiri for doing this because really, we approached a lot of people. They're the ones who were the first to step forward like this. The kind of support we've got from them, the close, they worked with us so closely and thoroughly over such a long period of time, guiding us, helping with the copy, the proofing, giving us such a beautiful, high-quality production, and paying writers on such a scale, doing a very proper launch of it in London. And very sadly, Sushila Nasta, the editor, she's a phenomenal person doing this for world literature for so many years. She was supposed to be here today. She was supposed to be on this panel. She had reached as far as Delhi, but then she fell ill, she was traveling with someone who fell ill, and she just couldn't make it, and she's heartbroken about not being able to come here in person. I'm sure she'll come back to visit, but it's phenomenal what Wasafiri does, what she and her team do.
Is there like a Korean Literature and Translation Institute, or I mean, do you have that in for Bangladeshi literature, or should it be where the government helps fund these translations and helps them get out into the rest of the world? Is that too much of a big ask for the country at the moment?
No, I think the government has traditionally not done that. This Bangla Academy, it is entirely government funded, and as you can see, it's a very substantial setup. So the government is certainly willing to spend on culture. With due respect, and Bangla Academy has done some very important work for Bangla language and literature in terms of certain kinds of, creating of archives, doing work on dictionaries,
funding
publishing works,
translation?
and translations. But with due respect, a lot of the past translations were done in a kind of English that I think it's fair to say wasn't contemporary enough. It's not English that would travel well outside Bangladesh. What's terrific now is, and Dhaka Litfest itself is a clear evidence of it, the government is so keen to work with private enterprises who are working towards the same goals. So because we have this kind of support from the Ministry of Culture and Bangla Academy now, with what we've done, we've already informally talked about them also working with us in taking our stuff outside. Okay. So let's say Bengal Lights is very equipped in hand with Dhaka Translation Center to produce the kind, style, and quality of work that we believe will travel abroad. But then if the government is willing to fund it, we find somebody in London or New York who, the way the Korean fund works, and a bunch of others, I think a lot of Europeans who have money do it.
Even if just for like promotion, the
just
Korean
for the
government will
promotion,
pay
or
for the author to travel, or
saying that we'll
or
pay for the 500 copies
exactly.
and certain things.
Yeah.
And if it takes off, then the publisher picks up on the rest. So given the kind of, I have a lot of faith in our current culture minister, so we're going to try to see if we can get this out while he's in charge.
Is he here?
He's not here, but we will talk to him.
Do we have time for questions? I think we...
I hope so.
Should we take a few questions from the audience?
If anyone
I
has
can't really
questions,
see because the lights are a bit... And can you...
There's a lady here in the front.
We've got to close the session, she says. How many do we have 5 minutes? We've got 5 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And can you put the lights up on the audience? Or
And if we can have the general audience light up. Otherwise, we won't be able to see our hand going up.
How many issues of Wasafiri have been put out, and what was the reason for the name Wasafiri?
Wasafiri is a Swahili word meaning travel or sojourn, and so it's in a sense traveling through words.
Next question.
And it's been in publication for over 30 years.
First of all, congratulations on this issue, and as coming from Himal South Asian, can I say we are also looking for writers, especially from Bangladesh. So please do send them our way. Two short questions. One, since Anis, you've been fairly provocative yourself. You know, you talked about being ambitious enough to approach these Western publications. I'm wondering what is required before we start considering publications from our part of the world as world-class international publications. For example, Bengal Lights. Is it just marketing which is going to change things? What will it take? And one for the person who did heavy lifting. Editing local writing for an international audience, it's how much do you explain? You know, do you have to write dal is a lentil soup? How do you trade that line?
So the question to me was, what was the question to me?
How do you collaborate with other?
Yeah.
No.
So what you
When you talked about taking
So-
Bangladeshi literature to a Western international product, when do we start considering our publications, for example, Bengal Lights, as international as well?
In fact, we have conceived of Bengal Lights as, and it describes itself as an international journal, and it doesn't publish only Bangladeshis. We solicit, we get pieces from people everywhere, and we publish it. When I talk about taking our writing to the world, I mean it, you've raised a very good point. I don't mean it as a judgmental way. For me, it's just a practical consideration of circulation, of actually literally reaching the world. And I think digital and online is really, it's a complicated thing. There's pros, there's cons. But for us, that is something we should be looking at more, because that's a much more affordable way of reaching a lot more people. It's going to take time. The infrastructure is still being set up, but we can do it.
Also, to form a collaboration with another magazine like the Griffith Review, Asian Literary Review, or you could do a collaborative issue, and that will help you, reach a wider audience.
And for the question you asked me, it's a very good question, because I actually drew a line between things like, say, for example, dal, it's sort of fairly in the common usage, so I left it at that. But if it's something like this, I just looked up this essay where it says, Premer Taj Mahal, so, love of Taj Mahal, or Taj Mahal of love. So that was translated, so I've inserted English words for that.
Anahita, if I can just jump in. There's a terrific book by Tabish Khair called Babu Fiction. Anyone who's that interested in this kind of issue should check that out. Because what we do, speaking of that cultural politics, the unfair or excess burden on people writing quote from other places is that an American author, John Updike, sits there and writes about, the first time he made out with a girl in an apartment of a New Jersey, suburban basement. And he's not worried about whether basement will make sense to someone in Bahasa or in Tagalog. He just writes it. And because America is a big market and it gets translated in a bunch of languages, it's, quote, universal. But if we talk about stuff that won't make sense to the Western world, who, for all sorts of obvious reasons, mediate the circulation worldwide, so there's a burden of explanation on us, which we call the native informant syndrome. And it's something, there's a lot of subtle ways of handling it so that you don't become reduced only to that.
I like to actually respond to that because I disagree. As I said before, I only deal in translated fiction and from all different languages. And I think what as a writer, you need to keep in mind is that the reader is cleverer than you think. As clever as you. So, and the reason why, somebody in the UK would pick up a translated work is because they already, they have already made a step towards you. They want to know a different kind of story. And for me as a publisher, that's actually my challenge, is to persuade those UK readers to open your book. That's my job. But your job is to actually, if it makes sense in the story, a lot of things, people pick up much more than you think. They might not initially understand those two words, but if it really jars to translate them into some bizarre English concept, no, keep it in the native tongue.
I think we have one last question because we've got to go. Do you you over the mic.
I just want to add to that conversation about, when I'm using cultural nuances or culture-specific words, or what I tend to do when I write is that I stop italicizing that. I don't put in italics anymore. Because if you read Junot Diaz, for example, he's putting in whole phrases in Dominican languages, and he's not bothering to explain that at all. I mean, you're trying to make a sense out of the whole construct there. I think we need to stop doing that, because when we talk about readers in English, we're not restricting it to just Western audiences anymore. I think it's far bigger now. I think just India has a huge readership, and I would consider them as good, and that's it. I think we should stop pandering to that now and create our own rules. I think Amit Chaudhary has something, he also has an idea about not wanting to do that. And I think he's in this festival somewhere. So I think this is a good conversation to have all over. Thank you.
Should we wrap up? We have to wrap up. Okay, thank you all, everybody, for coming, and please raise your hands. Round of applause for Hassan and Denise. And to Wasafiri. Thank you for coming.
Please buy a copy and tell your friends to buy copies.